What is up, everybody? We are here once again, and we have two great and very special guests that I am excited to talk about today. Two people who work with Beacon, Dr. Sandra and Haley. Are you a Dr. Haley? Or I don't want to miss. Okay,
No, I'm an LPC.
LPC. Well, it's always exciting, for us to talk about, emotions, trauma, different things that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really just excited about the opportunity. We usually give a couple of minutes to allow people to join in on Facebook Live. We're here every day at 11 a.m. Go for about 11 to 11:30. Today we have you guys for about 20 minutes, and then I know you guys got to go back and go, save and transform lives. So we're going to let you jump off, and then everybody will be stuck with me after. But, until then, we have 20 good minutes. I want to maximize those minutes. And ultimately, we just like to kind of start off with just asking to know a little bit about you guys. So, Haley, let's start with you. Are you a night owl or early bird?
Oh, I'm definitely a night owl. But now with work, I have to be an early bird. But I'm definitely, going to watch movies late at night, read a book. I'm a night person.
Okay. What's your favorite ice cream?
Ooh, butter pecan.
Butter pecan. You got a favorite brand?
Mm, the kind I get at the beach. That's the favorite brand.
Okay, the kind you get at the beach. Is this like there's a
Yeah.
special beach brand? You know.
Yeah, no, there isn't. But I just want to be at the beach eating that.
Yes, yes. Okay, I love it. I love it. All right. What about you, Sandy?
I am definitely a morning person. I cannot stay awake too long. And I like my morning time because the kids are still asleep. So I get to have my own time.
Yes, so much. Kids can impact so much. Like I feel like the first couple of hours for me are the best hours because it's the hours that no one's up. Angie is not a morning or a night person, so I get about 2 hours before anybody's up, and I'm just kind of like, yes, this is
Yes,
this is glorious. So, you
really
know.
nice.
So, what about your favorite ice cream?
My favorite ice cream is Ben and Jerry's Chunky Monkey.
Oh,
Have you heard of that?
no, I mean it's very specific though. I love it. Like so you are a
I,
woman who knows what you
for
want.
some people, I recently discovered Texas sheet cake, the non-dairy. Yeah, so because recently I've been doing non-dairy, so Angie just introduced me to Texas sheet cake, and that's I've been having a little bit every night. It's one of my favorites.
Okay, so that's awesome. So we have influenced it has made the top 10, the top five. So right now I'm just gonna say that's your favorite non-dairy ice cream.
Yes, yes,
Okay, good. So that is good. Well, that is exciting. Exciting. Well, you guys, I really appreciate you guys coming on today. And as people are jumping on, we got Angie on is actually on. Ricky, what's up, Ricky? How you doing? Angie says, "Hey, ladies, how you guys doing?" Um,
Angie.
Zarita Gray is on, and so Haley, I don't know how much you know, but each and every day, specifically in the midst of the COVID-19, I've just been trying to get on and just giving, our church members and others outside in the body of Christ, just some tips on how to, engage in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that we've been talking a lot about. We talk about emotions, emotional health. We talked about all the way from parenting. Angie and I was on yesterday just simply talking about budgeting. And if you guys didn't see that yesterday and you need some practical ways on budgeting, we give a budget sheet and everything. You can always go to blueprintchurch.org and you can always download. There's always a blog that we put to this, and there's also the opportunity to kind of, whether you're a reader, also to re-listen to it, and there's also some practical resources sometimes that we have. But today, what I wanted for us to do is to be able to talk about specifically, you know, um, anxiety, trauma. As we move in, the governor has reopened up. The Beltline was full. Sandy, we felt that fully. Like us, me, Abby, Sandy, and Angie, we walked a little bit on the Beltline. It's so interesting how I'm on the Beltline judging people. Like, how does that work? Like, how can I be on the Beltline judging others about being on the Beltline? That's a weird dynamic, but I did it really
Wear your
well.
mask though, so that's good.
Okay, I wore a mask. I'm a better than everyone else, so I feel good about me being on the Beltline. But anyway, I mean, even today, I was looking at a CNN article and just talking about how the stats that are often used by the president about the coronavirus, that they have redone all the stats, and it has increased drastically the amount of deaths that they are projecting now because of they said prematurely reopening there. I mean, they estimate, I think, Georgia to upwards to 3,000 more deaths in Georgia because of opening it up early. And so when I think about this reality, this new normal, and as we come into this, like that can bring a lot of fear and a lot of angst and anxiety, of some, past trauma, people who have already possibly lost their loved ones, people who have already been affected, or a variety of different reasons, or even there's so many just different impacts, so many different things. So I really wanted to kind of open up to you guys and just spend some time to say, like, oh, how does this impact your profession, impact you, and what are you seeing in light of the pandemic? Sandy, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having us on here. We're excited to kind of present some of this, but I'm seeing a lot of anxiety, fear, people calling in. They're in these environments where they have no outlets, maybe. So there's a lot more anxiety. A lot of their routines have changed. But I think today there's something a lot of us that aren't talking about yet. And Dahadi, you mentioned it a couple of times, that word, but we've talked about anxiety, economy, the impacts of being on the economy, just the virus, the impacts of virus on our health, fear, all of this. But as we look at the days ahead, we also want to be talking about trauma, and that word carries a lot of weight with it. There's a lot of connotations behind that word, but trauma is something important to keep in mind in these days ahead, and also as we reopen, and then as we come out of this pandemic. So I really want to focus this talk a bit on trauma, and then Haley and I will kind of tag team that and talk a bit about loneliness from that aspect.
So how would you define trauma first? I mean, I don't know if you're going to do that, but how would you define trauma?
I'm definitely going to.
Okay,
so,
go ahead.
But I'll just take you through this. The virus has disrupted so much. Like something like this that last happened was in 1918, right? But that was a flu pandemic. So we have never experienced anything like this, but we've been through natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, and then 9/11 was a big thing in our time. But that was different because we could gather in groups, we can be face to face and help each other in communities. This is a bit different because we're having to fight in isolation. So there's a lot more loneliness and fear here. Like, we can't even trust our friends. Like, I mean, like us walking on the Beltline, we can't even go near each other. We have to stay 6 feet. We don't know if someone's carrying it and asymptomatic. So there's a lot of trauma that's happening here. And the way I define trauma is anything that kind of psychological trauma, what causes damage to the mind, basically, is from something that's so distressing. And how many of us can say this is quite distressing, right? It's caused a lot of distress in some people's life. And not everyone will respond to trauma the same way. So you might be okay through this, Dahadi, but it might be really hard for me. And so some tips on how to come out of this, and it's based on mostly on a study looking at people who did well through disasters, natural disasters, and even through 9/11.
So can this event be a traumatic event for, even if we've never experienced that in the past? Like, just the idea of that, the fact that COVID-19 is happening, this can be a traumatic event.
Yeah, so trauma can also be defined as something that violates a familiar expectation about someone's life and world. So if you think about the virus, it's changed a lot of what's familiar to us, right? Like, we can't even, our weekends look different, our daily schedule looks different, and it's thrown us into a state of extreme confusion and distress and uncertainty. So that confusion and uncertainty is trauma. Okay.
That's good. So, how does the COVID-19 pandemic, how have you seen, people engage in that trauma? Because like you said, it's so different. I mean, the isolation, the being forced in, the same proximities. So it's kind of like no one wins in this situation, whether you're the introvert or the extrovert. If you're the introvert, you're locked into a place where you're never getting your alone time because everyone is in the house together. But if you're an extrovert, you're like, I need to see other people and I need to reach out, and it's just kind of like, and that produces a lot of like loneliness, and that could even produce a lot of angst, in and of itself. I mean, what have been some ways that you guys have addressed that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. When we're looking at loneliness, some of the research has come up that there's actually three different types. So there's loneliness, like intimate partner loneliness, like between husband and wife. There's loneliness with friends, and then there's this collective loneliness, which is like if we are not reaching together towards like this collective goal, like if we're not chasing meaning or something, or if we're not participating in kind of our faith, there's loneliness in that aspect. And so what the research has showed us is that the three different kind of variables and aspects of that means that we could be like, you could be with Angie and still feel lonely if the other two parts of your lives, if we're not getting those box checked off, if we're not connecting with our friends, or if we're not kind of participating in faith or chasing meaning in that. And so I think that tells us big things about how do we address that, because we're in a time where we can't really connect face to face. So we have to be very creative with that. So I think when we're looking at loneliness and we're looking at addressing the trauma that's coming from that, is saying, okay, which area am I actually in? Is it because I'm not connecting with my partner or my wife or my significant other or whoever, or is it because I'm not making a connection with my friends, like that deep relationship, meaning talking about our feelings? Or is it because I'm not participating in something bigger than me? And finding which one of those, and then kind of saying, okay, where can I creatively connect with those three?
Yeah. So what has been some of the things that have come from that? Like, I mean, what have you seen in the midst of the pandemic, and how have you been addressing it?
So yeah, we've seen, like I said, we've seen a lot more anxiety happening, just people not getting along with each other. In the midst of this, we've also seen a rise in domestic violence and child abuse cases. So you probably already know this, but like in 2018, they said 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 women experience intimate partner violence, and 1 in 7 children are abused. But recently, with all this lockdown that's going on, people don't have access to resources. Kids don't go to school. They're home. The parents are stressed. So everywhere across the country, across the world, people are seeing a rise in domestic violence and violence cases in general. I think I was looking at international statistics in South Africa. In the first week of lockdown, there were 90,000 reports of violence. In Georgia, in one of the hospitals, there was a 15% increase in domestic violence cases. So I think we're talking about this also because we have to be aware of what our friends and family and neighbors might be experiencing as we come out of this. So I've just seen it in a lot of phone calls about anxiety. People won't necessarily come out and say, this is the trauma that I'm experiencing. I think people don't know how to word it. So I'm hoping that as we leave this, some people will be more aware. Is this what I'm experiencing? Is this what my friend or my loved one might be experiencing? But we've seen it displayed as a lot of anxiety. But we know in general, looking at studies, that adverse psychological reactions when it comes to trauma are things like anxiety, guilt, loneliness, isolation, disconnection, shame, rage. Those are all common among people who are going through disasters or traumatic experiences.
Yeah. So what are some tips that you would recommend for us as we kind of engage, as we continue thinking about the days ahead?
I think some great tips were so Dr. Basil Vandercourt, Colt, he wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. He's a renowned trauma expert, and he had some variables that kind of contribute to this trauma, this collective trauma state that we're kind of entering in. And that's lack of predictability. So like, we can't predict what this virus is going to do. We can't predict those things, but we can order our days. We can create schedules in our days. So we can give some predictability to that. Immobility, what Sandy was talking about, of like, we're seeing the increase of domestic violence. We're seeing that aggression come out in anger. And so like, people being moving, like going and working out, getting out, having conversations, using that assertive communication with their anger so that it's not creating this dynamic of that violence. We're seeing a loss of connection. And so with loss of connections, having Zoom meetings, having house party apps, or doing something to kind of facilitate that, or going on the Beltline like y'all did for like 6 feet away, that loss of connection really contributes. So we really want to come around that. Numbing or spacing out. So we do really want to decrease our screen time. A lot of times, I think the first time all of this started, I was like, okay, what series can I just lock into here on Netflix? But actually numbing out is really, it doesn't help us because it gives us a sense that I'm not in control and like I'm just letting go here. And that's really what trauma is. When we're in trauma, that's what happens. And so
well,
if
Haley,
we're
hold on real quick,
engaged,
Haley. I need you to bottle up that message, and I need you to say the same exact thing to my children, because my children don't get that. They don't get that idea of numbing out in Netflix. They just see bad parenting. They just say, you're trying to control us. So I just need you to I'm going to take this portion of it and I'm going to go back and hit play again for them to say that, because oh my goodness, this is trauma for me as a parent. I just want you to
we'll
know
put in a little candy bar and just, feed it out there.
Okay. Yeah. No.
I like what Haley said, and I'd like to sum it up with 3 C's, because I told you about that study they did looking at people who came out of 9/11 with resilience and without adverse psychological reactions. They discovered a way to move forward with the rhythm of life, and they thrived. And that was 3 C's: control, coherence, and connection. So Haley mentioned all of those. So control is, what are my short-term goals? What are my long-term goals? What can I actually control? Because there's so much I can't control. So short-term goals are getting enough sleep, taking my medications, creating a daily schedule, So those are short-term goals. Long-term goals can be, like Angie said yesterday, budgeting, preparing for the future after we come out of this pandemic. Mm-hmm. That can actually relieve some anxiety and fear. Mm-hmm. If we have some long-term goals. Yes, they might not go as planned, but having that can be helpful. Mm. And coherence is creating meaning and sense out of your world right now. So that might look like a narrative that you have, and asking yourself the question, what do I want to be remembered for during this time? How do I want to come out of this time? And then connection. Just we've talked about this so much, I think so many times, right? The importance of human connection, whether you're an introvert or extrovert. And yes, we're not seeing each other physically, but that can be done virtually, like Haley mentioned. So the 3 C's.
No, I love it. Control, coherence, and connection. But these are ways to do it. I know we got only a couple more minutes with you guys, and I know there's probably a ton of questions and ton of things that people may have. But I want to ask you this: maybe someone on here is feeling like, man, I can identify with the trauma, like it's happening to me. What would be your recommendation for them, for them in that state? So like, you know what I mean? Like the question, like if, like they feel stuck there, but they don't know what are to reach out? Like, can they reach out to you? I mean, what are some ways?
Yeah, really. I think the first step is, I think, recognizing that and then telling the people closest to you and being like, hey, I'm struggling, because we do want to bridge that gap of connection. Mm-hmm. And then the next step of reaching out to, we're open at Beacon. We're seeing patients via telehealth and some in the office. So we are walking through those journeys with people. And then there's lots of other counseling offices out there of finding someone to speak with. But I would say it's twofold. Reach out to someone that is going to support you, and then reach out and get some help if you feel like it's significantly impacting your ability to function.
All right. No, that's really great. How
I would add to that, like as people are listening, you might not be experiencing this, but I think that to come out of this as a community in a healthy way, we need to think, what can we be doing as individuals to support others? Yes, we might not be able to do it in person, but things like getting aware of what is anxiety, what is depression, what is trauma, just reading up on it can be really helpful when you're trying to help someone else, even help someone identify what might be what you're going through, and having that person seek out more professional help if needed. Haley also has this great podcast called Unboxed, and she focuses on a lot of these topics, and I think that can be helpful in terms of people getting insight into what they might be experiencing.
Yeah.
No, there are lots of podcasts out there.
So yeah, I would love, that's like, what resources does Beacon, what resources do you personally have? in your last 30 seconds on, because I know you guys have to go, just please point us. What are the resources? What are, does Beacon have this on your site? Like, what, point us somewhere.
Yeah, we have some resources on our site, and then Haley can add more to this. But there are different large organizations like SAMHSA is one national organization that has a lot of material on their website. And then there's NAMI, N-A-M-I, National Association for Mentally Ill, and they have a lot of resources as well. So those are two great organizations to just look through their website. They have a lot of resources. They have support groups, so access to a lot of things on there. And then we will post on I think we already have listed on our website, beaconmhscounseling.org, about different resources as well. And Haley, you can add to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's actually .com. Yeah, .com. Yeah, we have a resource page that we are continuing to add on there. And then, as Sandy mentioned, the podcast is called Unboxed. It's on everywhere you get a podcast. You have Spotify, iTunes, you can check it out. And we just have different topics that we talk about there that is sponsored by Beacon. And then I think that there are some great, we've talked a lot about the mental health aspect. And then I think that what's also important, some good resources, is your quiet time. And having time in the Word is so important during this time. And so I think that is the ultimate resource that we're always going to come back to.
Thank you so much. You guys have been great. I really appreciate your willingness to join us and to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you. All right, you guys, as we continue on, we got about a few more minutes to talk a little bit more, about that. There was some really, really good information from both Dr. Sandra and from Haley, that, they are great resources at Beacon. It's a part of our church that is here, that their offices are actually here. The resources, the website, that's all in here in the chat menu. So we just really want to just continue to talk. Remember, the 3 C's that Dr. Sandra left us with was control, coherence, and connection. Control, the short term, and the long term goals. Coherence, basically creating meaning and making sense out of the narrative in our world. And connection, the importance of human connection. Let's go to some of the questions that you guys had. Angie talked about one of our children specifically. She said that she had 2 different kids approach her today, asking the question, what if this keeps going and life doesn't go back to the new normal? And I think one of the things that can bring about anxiety or anxiousness is that reality. And the reality is this the new normal? Is this kind of what we are expecting? And that can bring a fear, because there's a lack of control. There's a lack of a lot of those things, and we're in danger. And I really think that it's really important for us to recognize that. And oftentimes it's us trying to get away from the pain of life that brings about anxiety. And I think it's important for us to know that as it relates to the things that can bring trauma and anxiety, the loss of control, the loss of, I think we talk about the normal that many of us have. And so I think that's really important for us to understand and to know. Cindy, what's up, Cindy? How you doing? She says, how do I step into reading God's word when I just don't feel like it? If I'm too sad or feeling distant? That is a great question. And I love the way that Haley ended that, and just basically calling us and pushing us back to God's word. And the question becomes is, how do we do it when we don't feel like it, right? And I think this is what Paul was talking about, where he talks about buffet your body, right? Oftentimes when we talk about feelings, we say feelings are a great place to tell us where we are, but they're a terrible place to make decisions. What you do when you feel distance, or you feel lonely, or you feel numb, and I'm not connecting, or there's this there's feelings of that. And I would just say, explore those feelings. What about these feelings? Stay away from I should be, or I need, this is no. Okay, what about right now is making me feel distance from the Lord? What about right now is, quenching my appetite to sit in relationship with my God and with others with God? What about that? Am I numbing myself out through Netflix? And what is it? And I would just say, what do I need right now? Being able to go to and asking the Lord, like really say, what is it that I need? And now you can take what you need to the Lord, because there's a lot of times it's not just about sitting down with the word and just reading and just like, I gotta read because I have to read. No, it's just like we get to meet and relate to our God, right? We get to connect with him. And I would just encourage you to say, what is it that's making me numb out or making me feel distance? And what is it about my life? What is it about rhythms? And then to say, what do I need right now? There's a great book called The Needs of the Heart that Chip Dodd also wrote, that you begin to identify. Feelings allow us to take us and drive us to our needs, right? And I know that those are both words that we hate to say, that we both have feelings and we're needy, but feelings help us to drive to our need. And once we go to our need, then we can take that need to God. And I really think that that's important for us to approach God and his word in a different way than just simply, I got to read Malachi today, or I got to read Joshua. Like, don't look at it that way. Look at it as like, man, Lord, I have feelings and I have needs and I'm in a place and I need to bring these to you and allow God's word to speak to you out of your neediness. But you got to do the work on the front end. You got to be willing to tell the truth in confession before you can take him, take it to the Lord. So I think that's a great, great question. Loretta says this: we were watching the news yesterday in an interview with some sort of expert, can't remember the title, and it says, and the person said that pre-COVID life is unlikely to resume for 2 to 4 years. This is making my husband and I have different types of conversations about how we move forward now and live in this. Yeah, I mean, those are the projections are real. People are, talking about, I was looking the other day about the race for a vaccine and how so many people talk about how that is a process that takes multiple years and we're trying to reduce it into a year. And that, and so when we hear news like that of, man, this can be the same for 2 to 4 years, that brings certain realities. And that's why even our governors and people like that is like, obviously we can't remain in this way now because everyone has a projection, everyone has an opinion, and that brings different stress and anxieties. And it, like Loretta said, it brings about different approaches to how we address that. We all address this in different ways. So one, we don't need to project what we're feeling on everyone else. We talked about that very early. Don't project. You take ownership. I feel this way. I need this, right? But understand that there's other people who need other things. Like we talk about, some people, like they need the connection. They need, even if they are social distance, they need to go to the belt line. So it's not bad for them. They're not wrong because they're going to address it. It's just like, this is a new normal. What if this is the case? And they need that human connectionness. They need to make sense. They bring coherence. They need what we talk about, control, creating those short-term and long-term goals. What we do need to make sure is that we're all in the midst of our neediness, that we're considering others as more important than ourselves. And we are understanding that we need to stay safe in the midst of all those things, because you can get connection, coherence, and control without trying to, without being unsafe. Right. And I think we just need to separate the two for that, so that people are going to respond differently. They're going to respond differently. Cindy basically says, step into the truth of our feelings through confession. And I think that's the word. In here is just being able to tell the truth. So many of us out there are probably feeling anxiety and loneliness and isolation, but we're not willing to confess because we have just bought into the lie that emotions are bad, they're wrong, or even neediness is bad and wrong, and we just got to suck it up and it's tough through it. And that's just not the case. And hopefully you heard with both Dr. Sandy and with Haley today that it was just like let's just tell the truth. Let's just be honest. Like, these are things that just biology tells us that we need. And also spiritually and emotionally, these are needs that you and I have that are important for us to embrace, these feelings. And so Angie basically says, I've noticed myself kind of hiding from people. It was a subconscious, but when I processed that, I realized that I wasn't getting any alone time, so I was avoiding any other time. And I think that is so true. And that's what I was saying, like whether you're introvert, extrovert, or what I like to call an ambivert, that the COVID-19 has really crippled all of us, no matter where you are. The extroverts are not getting enough people time. The introverts are not getting enough alone time. And there's this tension that all of us have. And so the only thing that we can do is that we can tell the truth. Because the reality is that we can't control. Because even if I want to reach out to people, I got friends that may feel totally different, right? And so that I still can have that connectedness that I used to have that I cannot have today. And so we just need to understand that this time is that we need to grieve and we need to lament our loneliness. And instead of running from the pain and the hurt of our loneliness, as we talked about earlier, is that the ability to confess that loneliness and to take that loneliness to God is good. Because actually, if we're not willing to confess our loneliness, sometimes we can numb out. And Cindy, that's sometimes the reason why we feel apathetic or distant, because we're unwilling to feel. We don't want to feel lonely. We don't want to feel isolated. So we'll just numb out, and then we'll just stop feeling. We'll numb. And I think that is a dangerous thing for us to do, right? All right, a couple more. Angie says, she already talked about that. And Cindy responded, me too, hiding just because I don't know how to confess I'm grieving. This is a sad time, church. This is a sad time, and we need to grieve. We need to lament. This is sad, right? We need to lament our loneliness. We need to lament our fears. We need to lament that this situation, and it's okay, because what we're doing is that we're honoring what we're lost. And the reality is that we have lost human connection with a lot of people. We have lost rhythm. We have lost, for some of us, the purpose of building. There's so many different things that we have lost, and we just need to grieve that, and it's okay. Remember, we talked about the songs of lament, the psalms of lament, that a third of our psalms are lamenting, are just David and the psalmist crying out to God, grieving. And it's okay to grieve. And I think that those that are able to grieve well will do better in this season, not because we love grieving, but because the bottom line is that we're honoring what we have lost. We're honoring the human connection, the relationship. We're honoring that. So grieve our loneliness, grieve our hurt, grieve the COVID-19, grieve the pandemic, grieve all of this, and and just let's take it to God. Let's take it to God, and then to say, out of that grief, what do we need? Some of us is this the need to grieve. So pick up the book, The Needs of the Heart. Keep coming back. Again, every day we're here. Just try to engage and interact. And we just really want to hopefully make this that is helpful for you guys. So we love you guys. We appreciate you. And until tomorrow again, what we'll be talking about, we'll be back in Acts chapter 20, and we'll get into some of the, how to go from quiet time to proclaiming God's word. And every day, these things are written in both this form, but they're also done in written form, that we take these into blogs. So if you want a blog, you can go back and listen to any of the ones that we've already given, but also you can go back and read the blogs, blueprintchurch.org. Go and look at the blogs, see it, and we'll put that in the memo as well. Not the memo, but the chat for us. So love you guys, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. God bless.